What's going on, friends? Greetings from beautiful Dubai. Slightly different, setup than usual, but just actually got a bit busy this week as my mom is in town, so doing a lot of sightseeing. So didn't have time to record a regular video, but still wanted to jump on here and share with you a couple of thoughts, especially in light with what's going on in the markets in recent times. A lot of people have been asking me, what's happening, what's going on? Is it time to sell and take profits? So I just want to come on here and share a couple of my thoughts. And obviously it's really interesting to see we're less than 3 months into the presidency of Trump, and it feels like already a long time with so many things that have happened, and we still have a long time ahead of ourselves, right? So I think it's just a taste of what's to come. Obviously he's an interesting character. I'm not a political channel, so I'm not gonna speak about him necessarily, but more of what we can do as investors to navigate the markets right now, right? And one thing, first of all, I really want to caution everyone is to overreact, right? News make their money on crazy headlines, right? And I think for them, Trump is perfect because he makes a lot of wild statements, half of which never materialize and half of which he backtracks shortly after. And I think that's very similar to what we see with the tariffs right now, because that's one of the main drivers of why we see in such a major market corrections recently. A few days before, he came up with the tweet that he made on his Truth Social, then on X, about the US central bank basically taking certain cryptocurrencies as part of their reserves, which is amazing, right? That should be such a bullish statement for the crypto markets. Imagine if they take Bitcoin and Ethereum and a couple of other coins he mentioned as part of their reserve currency. That's huge, right? That means the banks, the Central Bank of America is actively buying those cryptocurrencies. Amazing. And obviously that will hopefully also lead other central banks to buy more of that. So that's great. However, shortly after, when he came out and introduced those tariffs on Mexico, Canada, I guess also Europe and China, that's of course when the markets really drop, because tariffs are a lose-lose game. Nobody wins with tariffs. And we saw that already, because as soon as he introduced those tariffs, guess what? Those other countries, they aren't stupid, they aren't sitting around. They retaliated those tariffs and imposed the same amount of tariffs on the US. Basically what it does, it just makes the whole goods for Americans more expensive. But you have to keep in mind, one of the big promises that he made during the election process was to American people that he would be able to lower the cost of inflation, the cost of goods, and bring those costs down, because they just been exploding, right? And the normal American, for them things were too expensive. But guess what? A tariff actually leads to higher prices, because now those imports, when you buy a car from China before because it was cheaper, now those tariffs make it much more expensive. Yes, ideally the idea is to bring people to buy American brands, but ultimately they're more expensive, right? So you don't have the option of cheaper goods anymore available, and that only makes everything more expensive. So, that's kind of the main logic behind of why we're seeing, all those red numbers in recent times. At the same time, of course, in line with that, we have the whole situation with Russia and Ukraine going on, and it's really unfortunate. While of course I spend most of the time here in the UAE, the summers we spend with my wife in beautiful Lithuania in Eastern Europe, which is actually quite close to Ukraine. So for us, we watch this very carefully. We bought a property there in Lithuania as well. So of course, you get a bit nervous when you hear all the things that he's saying, that they're withdrawing the support from the US and so on. So that's definitely something we're monitoring closely. And if they were to pull out, of course, that would be really upsetting, I must say, for everyone involved, and it would be a really dangerous situation for Europe as such. Of course, some smart investors, they're seeing also opportunities in this, right? Because now, if the US was to withdraw completely, which they're not doing from entire Europe, but at least from Ukraine, what does it mean? Well, Europe has to gear up their investment spending on defense. And we've seen that already with companies like Rheinmetall from Germany and some other European defense companies. Their share prices have been absolutely exploding. Crazy numbers we've seen there. And I think it's smart, right? If you got in early, great. Will that continue for long term? Honestly, I don't know, right? Again, coming back to Trump, he makes so many statements. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few days or weeks, we have eventually an agreement with the minerals deal and other discussions that are going on where they will come back and stay there. So I still think those European defense companies could be potentially a good investment. And recently I actually read a very interesting article where it said that Trump might actually want to have a recession. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but when you think about it, right now he's still new in office, right? The first few months, what you can do is blame the recession on the previous administration. He always likes to blame Biden for everything. So he could say, because of all the mistakes that Biden and his administration did, we are now entering a recession. Okay, well, people would kind of follow that. What would that mean? Basically, they would have to counteract that by lowering the interest, maybe even negative interest as we used to have in the past at some stage. That would bring also the prices down massively. It would bring down the dollar value, and therefore more foreign investors would potentially invest into the US, which he wants to have, right? He wants more foreign investment into the US, setting up manufacturing there, chip factories, all these things. That's why he also has the tariffs in place, so it makes it more interesting for companies to produce in the US. So that could actually be a strategic play, right? Even though it's a bit counterintuitive, thinking about it might be something. Nobody knows, it's just speculation. But that way, he will be the hero because prices come down, all of a sudden more investment goes up. So in the next year or two, we would start seeing major growth and GDP growth, definitely. While in the short term, he could blame those problems on Biden. But obviously, nobody knows exactly. So there's so many question marks. I think it's very difficult to outsmart the market because we just don't know, where the market is going to go. And we don't even know what Trump is up to, what he's going to do. And definitely the US, being as powerful as they are a major driver of where the economy and the world is being headed. So from my point of view, what will I be doing about it? Well, honestly, nothing really changes for me because I will just continue to dollar cost average the same investments that I've done in the past. When people say now it's the end of the year, they're decoupling from the world, in my opinion, that's really short-term thinking. The US is just too huge. Yes, they're now ruffling a few feathers and not really making themselves friends. And I personally also don't agree to many of the decisions and moves. But again, long term, I think the US just has such a strategic advantage. Also the companies you're investing in, right? While I do understand that people, want to now invest into Europe to support the economy, and that's great. I absolutely love it. We're moving from MAGA, make America great again, to MEGA, the blue caps, make Europe great again. And I love it and I'm all for it. But really, I don't see major companies standing out, niches, AI players that could really take over from the US, Spending on defense companies, I get it, right? They probably will do well in the coming years. I have no problem. If you want to have a bit of diversity in that, totally fine. But do I see companies long-term outperforming the US? Honestly, I just don't think that. Well, obviously, China will play a major role in that, especially in the AI race and technology. But yeah, personally, having lived in China, I just don't want to invest in China. It's just, I've seen how things work over there. So personally, I prefer investing in the US in the transparent system where I can see what's happening with my money. Companies are audited and sort of have really transparent balance sheets, profit and loss. So I just prefer that as an investor. But obviously, you also have the choice to invest into a global ETF that are globally diversified, that invest in all companies across, the world, basically. You can have, an MSCI World ETF where you have more than 3,000 companies. So if you feel great about that, that's, I think, a great option as well. Personally, I will, as I said, continue investing in the S&P 500. Right now, when I see the markets drop, I'm excited because I get basically a discount on my purchases. I get more shares for the same amount of money that I used to have to pay for more in the past, right? So I think that's great. And I'm really a long-term investor, right? Because let's be honest, we have seen 2 world wars and the S&P is still up if you held on to it for long term. We have seen financial crisis, COVID, all these things, yet here we are and the S&P is at all-time highs. And especially when people say, yeah, but the US market is overvalued. Overvalued compared to what, right? We've never been in a stage where we had AI, so much efficiency. So applying old valuation metrics to those companies, I think it's also a little bit hard to justify, right? Obviously, we're now in much different times than when we evaluated a company like Coca-Cola, to evaluate a company like Palantir, even like Amazon, who invests so heavily into future infrastructure. You have to apply different metrics. And I'm really bullish that while in the short term, we're going to see quite a bit of pain, maybe globally, maybe we're entering recession, probably in the US as well. But long term, those efficiency gains using AI, ultimately, I think the stock market will get even more important because most Americans, they're going to put their money in there. So if that was to collapse, trust me, Trump would feel the heat and he will make sure anything he can do to make sure the stock market long term will go up. That's at least my conviction. And I always say you got to have conviction in your investments. And that's why I feel confident with it. Yes, it's going to be short-term pain. I'm prepared for even more red numbers. Same, I recently added Amazon. And since I bought it, it dropped. Great investment, Kai. But again, I'm bullish long-term. I will keep on adding to my position. I feel really good about it. And I think long-term, it will turn out well. While I can see opportunities in Europe short-term, long-term, I just don't see enough companies to get me excited to start investing into European ETF or specific companies that can really compete or even outperform the US market. So yeah, I'm bullish on that, but ultimately, as I always say, please do your own research, have your own conviction, and if you feel too much dependence on the US is not good, then go for a world ETF or even ETFs that are world ETFs excluding US, right? If you really don't want to have any exposure to the US, just do ask yourself one question. If you think the US goes into major recession, Do you really think that the rest of the world will do really well? Personally, I just don't see such a scenario. I think the world is so intertwined that if one major country goes down, we're going to see a similar situation in other countries. But hey, you might disagree and find your own investment strategy, and that's very important. Don't listen to what people tell you online. Use that as research, as idea generation, but ultimately you got to find your own investment strategy and stick with it and continue to invest for the long term. As I always say, it's much easier than trying to outsmart the market in the short term. But I'm really interested to hear from you guys. What do you think about it? What are you going to do with your money? Let me know in the comments down below, because again, there's no right or wrong, right? And I think it's obviously really exciting times in a way. I think we're going to see quite a bit of short-term pain for long-term gain. And if you want even more insights or discussions on this topic, then also make sure to join the Smart Money Club. It's free of charge to join. Can't wait to see you guys on the inside. All right, friends, with this, best regards from sunny Dubai, from the beautiful Palm. Love this place. When you're here, you don't really think about the markets that much, which is also refreshing sometimes. Anyhow, as always, thanks a lot for watching. Stay healthy, get wealthy, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.